Hey everyone, welcome back. In the previous episode, we took a look at how to implement authorization and authentication and the different tools that .NET Core provides us with in order to make it a little bit easier, and so we don't have to create these objects again and again. And what .NET Core gives us is a really good baseline. And we practically cover most of the baseline that it gives us. In this episode, we're going to move on to the OAuth world, and the first topic that we're going to cover is JWT tokens, which is essentially going to be something similar to the basic episode, right? Where we're just going to go ahead and construct a claims principle, but JWT style, all right? So when I say JWT, I mean JSON Web Token, which I might refer to as a token as well. So what we're going to try to do is essentially replicate what we've done in the basic episode, but for the token part. Okay, so what I want to do is first I will go ahead and separate the solution out a bit so it's a little bit easier to navigate. So I'm going to go ahead and add a basic folder. I'm going to grab these two projects and stick them in there and forget about them. And the next thing that I want to add is an auth folder, and this is where we're going to start playing around. Alright, and the first thing that I want to add is a new project. I'll create an ASP.NET Core web application. Let's click next and let's call it server for now. And I want to select the empty template as always. So before we start, I want to make it clear that the JSON web token does not relate to auth directly. It has just become the standard for how to securely create an authorization token. Okay, in the auth spec, it is described as an authorization token. JWT just happens to be a very good implementation of that authorization token. What the JSON token allows us to do is to expose the public information and still maintain the validity of the token. So the information that got put in the token is what's been put in there by the server and hasn't been tampered with. Okay, so first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the startup and let's clean this up a little bit, and we're going to copy some stuff over from the basic functionality. So let's actually go in here, go to start, and I will grab everything from the configure and I'll paste it here. And maybe let me zoom in a little bit more. And everything that I have here, I will paste it in here as well for the services. Now what I will do is I will actually remove the configuration for my controllers and views, and let me remove everything else regarding the authorization configuration. And we can remove the auth cookie. And what we will do is we will add auth as our new authentication scheme. Okay, and let's remove these comments. You can keep them if you like. I don't want them. And what we'll do is I'll grab the controllers folder and the view folder. I'll copy them and I'll paste them into here. And for my operations controller, I will delete it. I will remove most of these actions. What I want to be left with is the secret page, the index page, and the authenticate action. Okay, and I'll remove allow anonymous because we don't have the global authorization filter. Okay, I'm just gonna double check that I have the views, and I do. And what I want to do is I just clean up these namespaces and rename this to server. So let's go ahead and launch this and see what kind of errors we're getting and what it's gonna tell us in order for us to be able to go ahead and I'm actually just remembered starting up the wrong project. Yeah, let's just take a look at the errors and see what it's going to tell us. Okay, so it seems I have still some stuff in the index page. I do. Let me go ahead and remove this, and the secret page is left as is. Now I'm on the home page. Let's go ahead and go to home, secret, and it's basically telling us that there is no authentication scheme that was specified, and there was no default challenge scheme. So challenging is essentially verifying the authentication. Now, what I want to do is, because we're going to be doing JSON web tokens, I'm going to go into startup and I'm going to add add Jwt Bearer, and I'm not gonna have this package. So in .NET Core 3 they have split it up. So let's go into Manage NuGet Packages. We're gonna browse, and we're gonna browse for Microsoft ASP.NET Core Identity JWT, and it's not identity, it's rather authentication, right? So Microsoft ASP.NET Core authentication.jwt bearer, and this is what we want to install. Okay. So once that it's installed, let's go ahead and we don't even need to import it. What this accepts is an action for configuration and an authentication scheme. So let's go ahead and specify the authentication scheme here, and we're just gonna scaffold the configuration without really filling it out too much. So now that we effectively have a authentication schema, let's go ahead and fire this up again, and we're just gonna see what it gives us. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead to home/secret. There is no default page setting for redirect as there is with when we add cookies, but here rather it just gives us 401, and 401 means not authenticated. Okay, so we're gonna try to authenticate ourselves, and if you remember here in the basic example, because to remind you again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to replicate this authenticate functionality, but in the token manner. What we're going to try to do is to create this user, and this is how we're going to authenticate, okay, by essentially creating a user. So same as before, we are going to go ahead and start with some claims because that's the de facto way right now to construct a user. And we're going to not go too far as before, since you should be familiar at this point. What we will do is we will go over some JWT registered claim names. Okay, and this is an object with just some static strings. And if you want to know a little bit more about it, we can go F12 onto it and grab one of these links, and essentially it will take you to the specification document, and here you can take a look at what most of these are, and these are just well-known claims. And the ones that you will mostly end up using is this subject, audience will be kind of in the background, expiration time, not before, it's going to be there, but you don't really, haven't seen that use it. But essentially just know that this list right here, it's something that's defined in a document somewhere, right? And everybody's trying to follow that document because it's been well designed. And let's say if somebody's going to make a JWT framework in Ruby or Java, they are probably most likely going to have the same class with constant strings from which you can essentially grab these well-known claims. Okay, so this is how programmers tend to work. All right, so every language is going to have its own implementation of the specification, but the idea behind it is the same. So your skills are transferable if you know the specification. Okay, so and what sub is, this is the ID. So usually if we have an like an identity user, as in the identity example, you can grab user.id, and that's what's going to be assigned here. And when we go forward in the identity server tutorials, you will see how this is happening. But here we don't have the infrastructure, same as identity is for regular cookie authentication. That's why identity server is going to be here, right? But at the moment we don't have the infrastructure, so we're just going to wing it, right? We're just going to say some ID. Okay, and this doesn't stop us from creating our custom claims like grandma says, right? Or let's just say granny, and we'll just say cookie here as well. Here we have claims. Next thing that we want to do is we want to create a token, and what this token is, and it's important to distinguish between the C# world and the JSON world, because it might get a little bit confusing. But this right here is the C# way of representing a JSON token. Okay, so if you would go and take the JSON token, parse it, this is what you would get, same as you basically say JSON convert deserialized object and you specify some type. This is essentially what the JSON token can be converted to. Okay, and for this JSON token, what we'll need to do is, this is really the header that we're interested in, and that's how we're going to construct it. And part of here is where we supply the claims. Okay, so first thing that I want to do is actually I'll just create a class where I'm going to just put some constants for here. Constants.cs, and this is going to be a static class where I will go ahead and define a constant string, and I'll say audience. Okay, and let's remove this. And because this server is going to be issuing the token to himself or herself, depends on what this server, what this application identifies as, we're gonna go ahead into, I'm gonna right click, I'm gonna go into properties, and what I want to grab is, I'm gonna go into debug, and wherever I'm gonna be serving this server from is where I want to set the audience and essentially the authority as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about what this means. You can also start the application up and grab the URL from here or from the properties of the application, right? And we're just gonna put it here. And then we can clear out these useless using imports. I'm going to keep this here. We're going to use this for other stuff as well. But please do mind the stuff that I'm going to put in here. This probably should be user secrets or stored in your app settings. I'm just doing this for simplicity purposes. Let's go back into the home controller and let's take a look at the constructor again. And what we want is the issuer, the audience, claims, not before. And if you've seen me going through the spec, this is going to be one of the claims. So we're not specifically supplying that not before claim here, but I think we could. So let's go ahead and check the NBF, I think it was NBF. So yeah, this is going to be that not before. So we can add it through here, but we're going to be adding it through the constructor. Okay, so let's go ahead and change this back to sub. So let's go through these one by one instead of like analyzing them and then going through them. So what I will do is put into my constants is an issuer, which is just going to equal to the audience in this case, okay? Because really they're going to be the same thing. So the issuer is going to be the audience because the server is issuing the token to himself. So let's go ahead and grab the constants, and we're gonna grab the issuer. So this is going to be the first parameter, and then we're gonna grab the audience, which is going to be the second parameter. The third parameter is going to be claims, and then there are going to be two date times, which is first one is not before, and the second one is expires. So not before is essentially when the token starts to be valid, which we really not really concerned, but it won't hurt to just go basically date time now. Okay, and expires, we can grab date time. Date time dot now. Let me move that, and we can add days, and we can just add 1 day, or we can add hour. Depends on how long you want your token to be valid. You can add it here. And the last thing is signing credentials. Now, first we're going to go ahead and implement this, and then I'm going to go over a little bit more, and you will understand how the token gets created if you don't already know it, if you haven't watched like 1,000 videos. So I can see the class, it's signing credentials. So let's go ahead and create signing credentials equals new signing credentials. If you don't want to type it out, you can always navigate to the class, go to the end here and copy the name of the class, go here and paste it in, and voila, you got your class. Okay. So you can either supply a certificate. I'm gonna go through generating a certificate for identity server once we get to it. But here, simplest example possible, we're gonna go through the security key and algorithm stages, right? So let's go ahead and look at the security key. And what we can do is we can just go ahead, press F1, and what this will do is it will navigate us to the Microsoft documentation page, and here we can see the classes that implement the security key. Because this is an abstract class, we want to grab one of these, and from the examples that I've seen on the internet, we can usually people go with a symmetric key, and it's easier one to teach. Asymmetric key, you will need two different keys, and the setup will be a little bit more complicated. So I'm just going to go ahead and opt in for the symmetric key. So I'm going to grab this class name, I'm going to close this, and let's go ahead and set the key here. And let's say new symmetric key, like this, and let's see what it needs. Okay, and we just need some array of bytes. Okay, so usually the way the access tokens are created is you have some sort of a secret. Okay, so let's go ahead into constants, and let's create a secret. Again, I'm even naming it a secret, so you should be aware that in production you will be storing it in some secret vault and injecting it into your settings when you're deploying it. And here we want to put something along the lines of not too short secret, otherwise it might error, right? So you don't want your secret too short, otherwise it might give you an error. You wanted something sizable, you can just do one of these guys, but I'm gonna stay at this value. So let's go back here and let's grab our bytes from our key, right? So let's convert this to secret bytes equals encoding. Okay, UTF-8, and here we want to grab constants and grab the secret. And I forgot to grab the bytes, so get bytes. And this is basically how you convert a string into a byte array. And now what we can do is pass the secret bytes into the symmetric security key. And now that we have the key, we can go ahead, pass it here. And the next thing we will need is an algorithm. So the way we can grab an algorithm is, thankfully, because we imported the namespace that's relating to all of these, we can type in algorithm, and here we will have access to the object security algorithms. And here we want to go for one of these algorithms. It doesn't really matter too much which one, but one of the most common one is SHA-256, and that's what we're going to use. Let's go ahead and append this algorithm here, just like that. Now that we have our signing credentials ready, we're going to go ahead and put them at the end here. Now at this point we have a C# representation of a JSON token. We can't quite just go ahead and serialize it like JSON convert.serialize object. We can't do that because if we go here, we're going to see a bunch of other stuff that is here, and we don't want to try and handle that through the serializer. What .NET Core provides us with is a let's actually grab a token string, or we can call it JSON actually, token JSON, and what we'll grab is we'll grab a JWT security token handler. So this thing handles security token. Now if you are sort of catching on a pattern right now that we have an object, we have a handler for it. So we have an object, do something with it, handler, if not, just keep following along. And in here we're gonna supply our token. So we're gonna say write token, put this here, and what we're gonna do is end up with a string, and then we can go ahead and return a new object with token.json. Okay, and let's actually return OK instead, and we can call it something cool like access token. Put an equals. Okay, so let's just launch it, and we're just gonna have a look at it. So I'm gonna go to home/secret. We're gonna get authorized, and now I'm gonna go ahead onto authenticate. Okay, and when it comes out the other side, we get our access token. Now this looks pretty, yeah, just pretty. Okay, it's a beautiful thing. We're gonna go into jwt.io, and we are gonna go ahead and paste it here. And here we are going to see everything about our token. So the stuff here, this is basically base 64 encoded. So what we can actually do is we can decode this ourselves. And these two parts are basically no secret. This is why we can see basically the algorithm that we have used here on the JSON Web Token. Right? So the JSON Web Token is telling you about what algorithm is used, but it's not telling you which secret key has been used in this algorithm. Okay, this is something that's only known to our server, and this is how it's going to know if this data is true. But before that, how does it actually use that secret, or rather that algorithm with that secret? So this is essentially public information, how it's secured. And this is public information, essentially the information that about the cookie. So when it starts, sorry, not the cookie, the token. When it starts, when it ends, who's the issuer, who is the audience, or who's the intended audience, and just general information that we have added. So what's this end part about? It's essentially a base 64 edition of these two parts, and then that's using the SHA-256 algorithm along with the secret key in order to produce this signature. So if somebody in any way goes ahead and tampers with the data, the server, when it will receive this token, what it will do is it will essentially grab these two parts and it will just use the algorithm and the secret to hash it again, and it will receive the signature. And if the signature is what is on the token, if the signature on the token is the same as what the signature that we get here, then the token is essentially valid. Not essentially even, the token is valid. So the signature is a base 64 edition of the algorithm and token type and the data, the payload of the token, right? So these two are public, and this is a secret because this is what the algorithm and the secret that we store on our server is used to generate. So essentially, if anybody tries to change any of these two parts, when the token returns to the server, this is going to be regenerated by the server using these two parts. And if it doesn't match the signature on the token, that we know that it's not a valid token. This is not what we have issued. So enough about JWT. I think at this point you should be able to understand it. How can we use it? So before we can go ahead and try to authenticate the token, unlike the cookie middleware, we'll need to, let's stop this. We'll need to set up some middleware or other configuration in our startup, and what we'll need to say here is essentially provide some token validation parameters. So let's go ahead and bring up the config. Let's grab token validation parameters, and let's say new token validation parameters, and that is way too long. I will remove them and import the namespace. Okay, and this is going to be a new object. Okay, and in here we want to specify three things. We want to specify our issuer, our audience, and the signing key. Okay, so at the moment when we apply the secret, we are applying it only here when we create it. Our service doesn't know anything about the secret yet. All right, so we need to basically tell it, right? when you're gonna receive the token and you're gonna grab the header and the payload and you're gonna try to recreate the signature, this is the key that you will need to use. Okay, so let's go ahead and ish your signing key, and we will grab the, not system, but rather, actually we can just go ahead and, where is our key? We can go ahead and copy this here. So right here. And there we go. So that's our issuer. The next thing is we will, sorry, not issuer, that's our signing key. Validate issuer. So the reason we have to override this, if we basically go on the token validation parameter, the things that we'll get is these parameters are set by default are set to true. So we have to set valid values, otherwise it's gonna give us an error outright. So let's go ahead and grab our constants, and we will go ahead and set an issuer, and we will also need to, and validate issuer, sorry, not validate, valid issuer. All right, we can set this to false. Let's not. Let's go ahead and do this properly, because when you're gonna go ahead and do this properly, you will need to provide these and set these up. Not validate again. valid audience. Okay. All right. So we're setting the valid issuer and valid audience because by default they're set to be to check them to be valid, and that's why we are setting them on the token here, and we're checking for them here. And this is how we are going to recreate the signature using this key in order to make sure that the token is valid. So this information is all about checking that the token is valid. Okay, so let's go ahead and launch this. Okay, let's go to home, authenticate. Okay, I don't want you to translate. I'm wondering what it will translate it to. Let's go ahead and grab Postman. Okay, and in Postman, what we want to do is we want to grab this route, and we'll say secret. And in the header, what we want to do is specify the authorization header and specify the bearer token. Okay, and in here we'll just paste our token and send. And what we'll do is we will, in our response, we'll get the secret page. Okay, so you can play around with this. You can basically stop the application. You can go ahead, comment this out, start it again, and see what you get. So essentially here, now that we have removed the parameters for how to validate the token that we provide becomes invalid here, right? And what you need to understand about the token is that it's stateless. So usually you'd have a session on your server, the ID of which would be stored inside the cookie, and that's how, when the cookie is being passed to the server, we can actually identify if the user is authenticated. With the JWT token, we actually use this configuration here to validate if the token is indeed what we have issued, and if we can actually authenticate by it. And the way we do that is we check the issuer on the token, we check the audience on the token, and then we use the key with the header and the payload and our algorithm to create a signature. And if the signature that we have created matches the signature on the received token, the token is valid, and then we can take our steps to authorize based on claims, etc. Another thing that I would like to show you how to do here is, what if we don't want to pass the token through the header? What if we want to pass it through the URL? Because in some cases, the APIs actually accept the token in the URL rather than the headers. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to just show you how you can configure that. In config, we can grab events, and we can grab Jwt Bearer events. And again, this is too long. Let's import this. This is going to be a new object, and on message received, let's go ahead and hover over this so we can see or navigate. And this is a function which has a message received context. So this is the input, and the output is a task. So we're going to have some type of context, and it's going to output a task. Okay, let's stop this here, and let's go ahead and just return a task. I will need to import the namespace and complete a task. There we go. So what I want to do here is essentially say, right, if the URL of the query contains an access token parameter, I want you to try and extract the access token from there. Okay, so otherwise we're going to default to using the header. Okay, so let's grab the context, request, query, and this is very similar to the HTTP context. And we're going to check for contains key, and we're going to provide a access token. Okay, and in here, again, we can grab the context and we can set the token. So we can go into context, request, query, and use it as a dictionary. And the keybinds are a little bit weird, but there we go. And this is how we would pass it in the URL. So if I would debug it right now, let's go into home authenticate. Let's grab a token. And now we can go into secret. And this is going to be a 401 here. Now let's go ahead and say access token equals whatever thing, and now we can access here. And if we don't pass it in the URL, we can still pass it as a header value. Okay, so this is basically, if something gets configured under the hood, at least you can imagine how it sort of happens. This usually happens through these services right here. And just as a bonus here, I'm just going to show you that you yourself can go ahead and decode the header or the payload. So let's go ahead and go to public action result, and we'll just say decode and string part. So we're going to accept some kind of part of the token, and we're going to return OK for now, where here it's going to be the value. So first of all, I'm going to grab the converter, and what I want to do is grab from base 64 string. So what we're going to be passing is a base 64 string because that's what the header and the payload is. And I'm going to go ahead and pass the part here, right? So this is the part that we're going to be passing, and the stuff that it's going to return is a bunch of bytes. Okay, so this is the return type of this function. Now we can grab the same way that we have encoded a string, we can go ahead and decode it. So let's go ahead and grab encoding UTF-8, and we can get a string, and we can pass the bytes here. Okay, and let's go ahead and run this. So again, let's go to home authenticate. We can grab this top part, and actually let's grab the URL first. Let's call decode and grab the parameter part, and let's set it to this here. And here you can see we get pretty much the same, we get the same header as if we would put it here. So we're essentially doing the same thing that JWT website is doing. We're just decoding the part that is part of the token. So I'm just verifying that these parts, these two, the first and the second one, isn't the secret. The real secret part is this, because that's what we're using the algorithm for, specified in the header, and the secret in our constants. So this secret and the algorithm get mixed together with the header and the payload. So the header is this part, payload is this. We get the signature, and the way that we verify that the signature is correct, so the signature in the token will have to match the signature that we generate when we check these two values. Okay, this will be it for this episode. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like, subscribe. If you're still confused or have any questions, make sure to leave a comment. I'll try to clear it up for you. And as always, see you in my other episodes.